Yo, what's up everyone? This is Ignatius, and this is actually my 9th official video for PoE2. Alright, so for this video I have my 3rd build guide for the Dawn of the Hunt League. This is going to be my own personal take on a flickerstrike, ice strike, Amazon, Pinnacle content farmer, optimized especially for farming the new breach meta post-patch. I really wanted to make a build that could farm Pinnacle content really quickly and kind of with a new enjoyable spin that leverages Amazon and crit cap. I will admit this is not the most efficient build for mapping. For that, I would recommend my Whirling Slash build from earlier this season. And this is also not the most efficient build for farming Arbiter or logbooks, and for that, I would recommend my Lightning Spear WSF build from earlier this season. However, this is the most efficient and most fun build for farming Breachstones, King in the Mist, and it's fairly good at logbooks. It also can be a mapper, but it just isn't better than some of the other builds at that. The other huge upside of this build is that it is very fun and it is really cheap to build. I'm going to provide you links to items that total out, even this late in the season where items are scarce, to 20 divs or less for repeat Pinnacle content farming. With that short intro setting the stage, let's now dive in and ask the first question: why Amazon? So, this build will work on a lot of classes. Really, all you need to hit is crit cap and have some power charges, and you can delete Breachstones and farm Xesht very quickly. If you're not going to use Amazon, I would recommend Gemling, Ritualist, or Monk. Those three will be really strong. However, for what I'm target farming, I do think Amazon is both the strongest and the cheapest, which is a really great niche for Amazon late in the season. A big reason I went with Amazon is because, one, you get easy crit cap, which is essential for flickerstrike. We're going to talk more about flickerstrike and power charges, but essentially, the very first attack of your flickerstrike decides whether it crits for all of the subsequent attacks, up to 20, 30, however many times it chains. They all crit if the first one crits. So that means your first one has to be a crit. When you look at POBs for this build on other classes, you'll notice they run gems like Pinpoint Critical, or they really heavily invest in crit chance in the tree, which ultimately reduces damage or increases the cost of the build to achieve the same damage that Amazon achieves through the Ascendancy for free. We also get to capitalize on accuracy stacking both for crit cap and attack speed with Falcon Dive. The attack speed helps both the flicker modifier so that it runs off faster, which is not essential, but it's really fun, and of course it helps with Ice Strike for general clearing. Okay, first thing we're going to overview is a section that sort of reviews the key skills and interactions. I'm not going to go over all the skills. It's late in the season. Many of you, or most of you, understand what some of these standard things do, but I am going to go over the skills that are key for understanding how this build works and how it deletes Xesht in literally 1 second. So, first important thing to cover is power charge generation. We generate power charges by 2 methods. We run Cast on Crit with Profane Ritual, which, long story short, if there's a corpse in the area and you've crit, Profane Ritual is going to give you a power charge after the ritual is finished. It's worth noting that you should keep the level of this Profane Ritual as low as possible for mana cost. And then support gems, I have Fluke, which will restore mana back to you, Overabundance, which allows you to get an extra limit on the ritual and on the mark if you want to run it, and also Impetus, which will help the Cast on Crit generate energy more quickly. Now, the other way we're generating charges is with an active charge generation. This one is a bit more involved. We're running on our swap a Rattling Scepter, which generally generates skeletal warrior minions. You have to hit this plus sign up here if you've never used minions to make them come out. And then we run a spirit gem on swap called Sacrifice, and what this says is, while active, your undead reviving minions can be used in place of corpses. Because when you start a boss, you don't have corpses to cast your Profane Ritual on, so you need a means of getting corpses, and the Rattling Scepter does that. We basically swap, the Skellies come out, we do a couple of Profane Rituals on them, they die, and they give us power charges, and we can do what we want with them. So that's sort of the active method for power charge generation, and though it uses a lot of skill slots, basically we have a Profane Ritual, a Sacrifice, a Cast on Crit, a Swap Weapon, Skeletal Warrior Minions. It enables us to walk up to a boss and delete it without any pre-existing conditions. So it's very, very powerful, and it's what makes the build work. The second skill we'll go over is Ice Strike. just a few things about this skill. When you're doing your general clearing, you really don't have to flicker if you don't want to. It can get you in trouble. It can be frustrating if your charges are not up. It's really, really fun, but you kind of just need a general clearer just because. And I think Ice Strike is great. One of the reasons I really like it is a cold convert, so a lot of things are frozen and shatter. It also has increased range, so you'll notice it's a 3-hit combo. And on the third hit, you get about a 4x damage multiplier, and then you also get a +7 to melee strike range, which is really, really helpful for a general melee clear. And lastly, about Ice Strike, it being a 3-hit skill and the third hit being so much more powerful, you'll see a lot of attack speed modifiers on my gear, including on my quarterstaff, which is up to 1.75 per second. These are not required, but they are quality of life for Ice Strike, and a little bit for flickerstrike, and I would add them in there if you have room in the gear to do it. Last thing I'll say is that you can stack some flat cold with Ice Strike and flicker, and then run a skill called One with the River, either on a Megalo, even on your Anoint, or come over here and get it. It's kind of inefficient, but you could. That'll increase your freeze buildup quite a bit, and this will allow you to shatter things if you like the shatter method. Third thing we'll go over is Voltaic Mark, Herald of Fire, and Herald of Thunder. The reason these are here is for your AoE. So you'll notice that Flicker on its own has almost no AoE, which means that when you're clearing content and not just a boss, in order for Flicker to work, it has to hit every single minion. However, if you add a Herald of Ash, any level with no support gems, a Herald of Thunder with pretty much any gem setup, and a Voltaic Mark in your cast on crit, you'll notice that it's a really, really efficient AoE clear, and it works both with the Ice Strike and the Flicker Strike. It's very powerful. Another gem I really should call out, in case somebody hasn't used quarterstaves very frequently, is Charge Staff. This one's one I really could avoid mentioning because it's just kind of this passive thing you do, and it boosts your just overall ability and damage significantly. But if you're not familiar with it, it'll be useful to talk about it. So at the start of any instance, what you want to do is swap to your minions, get your power charges, and then cast a fully power charged staff. And if you look at this skill, basically what this does is it gives you a flat damage in lightning buff per power charge consumed up to your maximum power charges. It also lasts longer per power charge consumed. And then it also gives you this buff that applies this shockwave damage up to 5 meters in length as you're moving around flickering or ice striking. So you just basically want 100% uptime of this. You do kind of the pre-buff at the start of the instance, and then as you're fighting, your Profane Ritual is going to go off, and when you see this, when you see your power charges at 6, and you're just kind of hanging out, and you see your charge staff is starting to run down in this tooltip here, just re-hit it, and it'll rebuff, and it lasts about a minute or so. Okay. The last gems we'll discuss are Flickerstrike and Infernal Cry, which work together to kill the boss. Let's start with Flickerstrike. So a couple of things about Flickerstrike. Some of these I mentioned in the intro. It determines both the critical hit for the entire chain of Flicker and whether it is going to consume power charges for the entire chain of the Flicker on the first swing. Essentially, it's an all-or-nothing skill where you want max critical hit chance, 100%, and you want max chance to not consume charges. To achieve this, it's pretty simple. Get to your crit max, but also with the charge consumption, run a perpetual charge, which has a 35% chance to not remove, and then make sure it is qualityed up, which gives you another 20% chance to not remove. Essentially, when you're coming up to a boss, if it decides not to remove the charges, you will kill the boss if you've done things right. You can get your damage high enough that if it does remove the charges, it's still going to attack, 13 to 15 times on that boss. So if your base damage is high enough, it'll kill the boss anyway. I have my setup to the point where it takes about 34 million damage to one-shot T4 Xesht, who's the beefiest boss, and so even when the power charges get consumed, it kills him anyway, but it wasn't like this at the start. For that reason, Arbiter is not a great fight for this build. If you come up to Arbiter and you don't have the damage and the power charges get consumed, you then need to survive all of Arbiter's animations in order to still finish him out. So I'd recommend a different build for that. But for Xesht and everything else, the way that flickerstrike deletes them is incredible, and I haven't seen anything faster. It's really, really fun. Also worth mentioning that you can stack a 7th power charge on your skill tree. Talk a little bit more about this when I get to the tree, but I don't run this node here, and you could. There's also a pair of unique boots you can run, which give you a power charge, and then you can also add an enchant on your deepest tower, which gives you a power charge. So I go up to 6, which I find to be enough, and it spares some spots on the tree and on gear for other things that are important. But if you're lacking in damage, that's another way you can cheat some damage in, is by getting your power charges up. I suppose technically you could get them up to 9 if you run the Spiritborn charge, the unique boots, and the additional point on the tree. You will have 9 power charges. It's a little bit overkill, but if you're lacking in damage and you don't know how to get it, that's one way you could do it. Last thing we'll talk about is Infernal Cry. I have a whole video on doubling your DPS for bosses with just a few techs. Check that out if you're not familiar with some of these options. But the one that's really, really key here is Infernal Cry. Note the text carefully here. Empowered attacks gain 35% of damage as fire damage per 5 power of enemies in range up to 150%. So what we're hoping to get is all the way up to 150%. That's like 2 Sacred Flames just from 1 skill gem. But how do we get 5 power of enemies in range multiplied to the point where we're up to 150%? Well, if we hover over, if it'll let me, this power modifier, it says unique monsters always have 20 power. That almost gets us there. And then if we run this Red Blade Banner shield in our swap and we spec Infernal Cry to only run on the swap, then when we slam this one time after Xesht has spawned, we're already up to 150%. You can slam it twice if you want more rage and an extra buff, but 1 should be good enough if your damage is there. Okay, next thing we have to spend a decent amount of time talking about is itemization. Now, to be honest, this build really works with like 2 or 3 items, and I think I could be naked with the rest, and I probably would be fine just deleting Xesht. I'd die on a ton of other stuff, but honestly, that's really how simple it is. First and most important staple of the build is the quarterstaff. I've got a link here for a search filter that'll help you get one that does the job. Generally, you're looking at 10 div or less to get started. That is a real number. I just ran the search, and this one actually right here is insane. Somebody is going to get a steal on this because it's got the +7, it's got a 16 base crit, and it already has these crit bonus gems in, and these are really expensive right now. They're like 6 div each, so yeah, this is a super huge steal. I'm not going to steal it for somebody just because. I'm going to let somebody else get it. But here's what you need on your quarterstaff just in general. You need a base crit of around 14%. If you're not Amazon, it actually needs to be higher. We talked about Amazon at the outset, but basically we're getting extra crit hit chance base from our excess chance to hit with attacks for Amazon. So we're basically upping this base number on our weapon before we start multiplying. But in any case, even if you are Amazon, if you want to spend more and get a 15.5 or higher, this one's weird, it's underpriced. But yeah, if you want to get a 15.5 or higher, you'll be a lot stronger because you'll hit crit cap sooner, and then you can invest more points into defense or more damage. Here's some other mods that are useful. +7 to melee skills. So I actually don't focus on melee skills at all in my build because I just didn't want to mess around with it or spend more for it. But if you come to the PoE2 DB and look at the base damage for flickerstrike, you'll notice at level 20 it is 327. If we go up 7 more levels, we're at 550 according to this data mine. If we put 2 on our gloves, we're up to 638. That's from 327. So that's almost double base damage before crit multipliers on the gem just from getting 9 skills. So yeah, the 7 to skills is super powerful, even though you won't see it on my actual gear. I do have it slotted in here as an option on the filter. Another reason I love Amazon is that you can cheat DPS via accuracy. I'm sure everyone's familiar, but right here, attacks using weapons have added fizz equal to 25% of the accuracy on the weapon. This is insane. It allows you to get really cheap weapons, especially when it's not a spear. I just have the base DPS here set to 200 because we're going to get all our damage from accuracy or from the melee skills, one or the other. If your flat gear, your flat damage from your gear, like your flat fire and your flat lightning and your flat cold, is pretty significant, having this on your quarterstaff is good. We talked about attack speed earlier. It's a nice quality of life. And then, of course, crit damage bonus anywhere you can get it is really, really great. Okay, second item is Deepest Tower. This item is a requirement. I get asked this a lot. How much damage is Deepest Tower really adding? So I spent some time in my POB to kind of get it ready for this build. I am clocking up, and I do think this is accurate, at about 48 million DPS, and that literally means 1 second. And you can see it in the Xesht deletions. Xesht is about 32, 34 million health. So it is hitting that number. Two things to note in your POB. One, if you're Amazon, use your POB to understand what your crit chance is. The tooltip is so confusing. Right here it says 69. Right here it says 136.2. If we actually go below 100, a new line will show up here that'll show our sub 100 crit hit chance. Super confusing. Load your build into POB, and then you can come right here, and it's going to say crit chance 100%. And it's going to tell you what you're overcapped. I'm apparently overcapped 30% right now. I actually don't know how that happened. It was like 1% right before this video. Must have been some quick gear swap I did or something like that. But yeah, as soon as you get this down to 10% or less, then you can start coming into your tree and unspecking anywhere you're investing 10% crit hit chance. And there's usually an alternative node for crit bonus on the other side of it. You'll see that over here in this wheel. I'm in 10% crit chance. If I get over 10, I can come over here and get 15 crit bonus. Again, same thing down here. We've got crit chance, but we could come over here and get crit bonus. So yeah, use your POB, get to 100% crit cap, and then stop. The other thing we were talking about was Deepest Tower and the low life tech. So I'm at 47 mil, but if I just go to this configuration and say, is enemy on low life? No. 13 mil. So it's not optional. You have to wear Deepest Tower. You have to come to your tree and spec these nodes. This one's actually really good too. Watch this. Boom, 49, 2 million more DPS. And I choose to run a Megalo that has finality, but you could also run a From Nothing Jewel from Unwavering Stance. You can allocate finality and these two 30 damage on low lives. So yeah, low life tech required. Get yourself a good Deepest Tower. My search filter is going to show you one that either has the +1 to charges or that has the Spirit implicit. And these I've seen go as cheap as 1 div. Right now this search is showing them a little bit more expensive. But if we go offline, you'll see super, super cheap options are out there. You just got to kind of camp it with an alert, and you can get one for cheaper if you need it. Next set of items that are important are your swap items. We already talked about them, but in your offhand or in your second weapon slot, you need a Rattling Scepter for the Skeletal Warrior minions, and you need a Red Blade Banner for the presence count as having double power for your Infernal Cry. I've got 2 searches for this. It's worth noting that on the Rattling Scepter, the int requirement can vary a lot, so make sure you don't buy one that's like 170 int required and then you suddenly have to mess with your tree a bunch. Or buy a new one. I actually went out and got one that's only 34 int, just so I never have to worry about it. Also mention here in the tree that if you are having stat troubles with the weapon swap, you can just allocate some points to weapon set 1, and then in weapon set 2, as I've done here, come out and get some stat nodes that are only on that second weapon slot, just for meeting the attribute requirements of these items and the Infernal Cry and Sacrifice here. Last thing we have to talk about as far as items is everything else, and I do just lop them together. I think Beacon is really, really helpful. You could also run a Coming Calamity for neutralizing enemy resistances, but your Pinnacle bosses, they have high resist, so you want something that penetrates those resists, and Beacon is just kind of a slot it and do it all. And then all the other gear. And here you really can choose what you want to spend on. I am not kidding. If I had a quarterstaff, a Deepest Tower, and then just some flat on rings and gloves with this Rattling Scepter setup, I could delete Xesht. I should do a I should do a run of that, just like a naked run of that, and delete him. But I do think that would work. So everything else really is icing on the cake for deleting Xesht. Some of it you want for survivability. I am nearly res capped here. Let's see, that's my swap. Let me go back to my main. So yeah, I am way over res cap. There we go. Still way over res cap. Dude, oh, you know what it is? I'm in Act 1. That's why I'm seeing all these weird numbers. Such a potato, dude. Let me go back to my hideout. There's the normal numbers. Now everything makes sense. But yeah, essential things in these other slots, and I will include trade links for every slot so you can kind of filter things through. You need what's called flat damage on your rings. That's the fire, fizz, lightning, cold. Flat damage on your gloves. Ingenuity is really good. A hybrid evasion ES chest is really good. Take note, if you're not running the evasion ES hybrid or you don't have evasion, then unspec this spectral ward and go out and get some ES nodes up here maybe, or whatever works for you. And then, of course, you want to get your resists in a pretty good spot. And that's about it for items. Enjoy. It's a really cheap build. Our next major topic is the passive tree. Now, this tree is very set in stone in my opinion. I don't think there's a lot of decisions that you need to make. Really, only two things you need to decide for how you're going to get your damage, but either way, you're going to be getting like the same amount of damage. And then you kind of have to decide what to do with jewels. So, a couple of call outs in the tree. One is that we are doing some moderate accuracy stacking. We're not doing the whirling / uber accuracy stacking, but we are going to take advantage of this accuracy on weapon for damage, which means we're taking advantage of accuracy for crit strike base, which also means we ought to just take Falcon Dive so that we have a lot more attack speed for Flicker and especially for Ice Strike. Worth mentioning that right down here I don't grab this node, but this is a solid accuracy boost. Attacks gain increased accuracy rating to their crit hit chance. We are always going to be crit capped, so that's always a 100. It's really good. Other things to mention where you have some decisions to make. One is power charges. So one option is to only have 5, and you can come over here and for 4 points get this overflowing power +2. I go with 6. I spend 4 more points. I come get this power within. You could go to 7, spend 5 more points, and come get this lust for power. You also could find a Megalomaniac Jewel, which give you these. I camped a search for this for a while with some other mods, and nothing turned out, but it's something you could do. So yeah, number of power charges is a big one. And then the amount of crit bonus that you want is a big one. In my POB, my crit multiplier is 928, so I am heavily investing in that anywhere I can. Part of that is because my quarterstaff doesn't actually have a lot of damage. It just has accuracy, and my crit hit chance is only 14.32. I was just showing you a trade filter where there's ones with 16. I should probably go grab those, and then it'd be easier to get a lot more damage, but I'm kind of done with my iteration on this build, so I'm just going to stop here. Lastly, the jewels. So right here, I do have a Megalo, which gives me finality. This is this low life node over here. And then I do run 2 time loss jewels that give me 7 crit chance and 10 crit bonus per notable. These are not required, but the one here is really good. You only need one that's small radius, and you get 5 notables. That's incredible power. That's more than any anoint. Right here, I choose to kind of do the same thing again. 10 crit bonus, 7 crit chance, large radius. I get 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are all like slightly valuable nodes. This one I would take anyway. This one I would take anyway. These 2 are optional, but it's only 4 points, and they're kind of valuable. And then this one I sneak in here from the Megalo just to get a little bit more. This jewel is not required. You could easily just run an emerald or a sapphire. And then lastly, for the emeralds and sapphires, you definitely want either crit bonus or crit chance. I choose to do a triple that's crit bonus, crit chance, and max energy shield. I also have some emeralds in my stash, which are crit bonus, crit chance, and increased accuracy. Any combination of these will do. Kind of get the best one you can. Don't forget, sometimes these get really expensive, but if you search for one that has low rolls, you can hit it with a Divine Orb and re-roll the rolls, sometimes for much cheaper than it is to buy one that already has good rolls. That's about it for the passive tree. It really is pretty straightforward, and there's not a whole lot of decisions to make. Once again, you can use the weapon swap to solve for your stats in certain places. You know, Infernal Cry is another one that's really good to take a look at the PoE DB data mine for it, because getting it to a higher level does give it more base damage and like multiplier here. And also getting it to a higher level increases the strength requirement. But again, we're doing Infernal Cry on Weapon Swap 2 only. So you could allocate your crit nodes to Weapon Swap 1 because you're never critting in Weapon Swap 2. And then on Weapon Swap 2, you could allocate strength or whatever other stat you need. I did just publish a whole video last week on how to manage weapon swap points. Check that out if you're confused by that or if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, we got all the talking out of the way. Big, long overview monologue from me. Let's go actually do some gameplay here. Again, the goal of this build is most efficient breach farm as possible. It's also very good at other Pinnacle content. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to get my power charges with our swap, juice up my charge staff, and then I'm going to get some more just to have them for flicker. I am going to be hitting my mana potion a lot. And if you're noticing that mana is a problem in the general clear, just take out Voltaic Mark. Cast on Crit goes off constantly. Profane Rituals are really low mana cost, but Voltaic Mark is like 4x, and it drains your mana a lot. So if you pull this out, you should be just fine with clear with Herald of Ash. I leave it in just because. And yeah, when we get to Xesht, I'll talk a little bit more about the bossing, and we'll go from there. Profane Rituals, we get this up to 6. Charge Staff. Swap back. We'll do some more. And we'll start the run. Now you can pretty much just hold right click. I mean, Ice Strike is really cheap and really fast. And you can also have fun with it. You can wait a while and do a flicker. Pretty great. It's just all really straightforward. I suppose one thing worth mentioning is that when you get to a lull in combat, which I'm sure we're getting close to here. There we go. And you see that your power charges are at 6. You want to refresh your charge staff and then keep going. If you like flickering a lot, you can grab new power charges. Couple of things you can see working. One is the Herald of Ash. The AoE of Herald of Ash is just ridiculous. Another is our attack speed. So when you start a flicker strike, you're actually really vulnerable. There's this opening speed of getting it started. It's actually really slow. And so that extra attack speed, again, it has like a lot of quality of life components in this build. Not required, but it's really nice to have. All right, I've got 6. I'm in a lull in combat. I'm going to refresh charge staff. I'm going to do some more profanes. Flicker. Oh my god, it's so satisfying. Okay, we've finished the main clear, and now we're coming up to Xesht, and this is where this build really shines because we have no pre-existing buffs. We're going to just create them ourselves. We're once again going to go 6 and do charge staff. On our way in, we'll get some power charges. If you're ever running low, gaining a new one resets the timer. So you don't need 6 new ones. Just 1 and it'll reset. When Xesht comes out, I'm going to double tap Infernal Cry and then flicker him. You cannot hit Infernal until he is targetable or it won't work. 1, 2, fire. Done. It might even be less than 1 second. It's pretty freaking awesome. Love it. Nom 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 nom. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video valuable. And as always, I truly am just a potato. I just know a lot about a few things in this game, and I am often wrong with the things that I say and think. So if you see anything I've said incorrectly, or you have any knowledge to contribute to our shared wisdom on this build, please drop it in the comments. Join our Discord. Come collaborate. Let's do some PoE 2 stuff together. I'm going to get out of here. Don't forget, resist the mind virus and enjoy PoE 2. Thanks, great Sheba of the Mountain. You're the best.